equity, mate.
I will say this about investing. Everything you do learn is cumulative. What I learned at 20 is useful.
Welcome back to another episode of Uncovered by Equity Mates, a podcast where we shine a light on some of the smaller cap companies listed here on the ASX and globally. And as always, I'm joined by my buddy Ren. How are you going?
I'm good, Bryce. Very excited for this interview. We are speaking to Dr. Mike Jones, who is the founder and managing director of Impact Minerals. The ASX ticker is IPT. We are going into the world of mining explorers, and in particular, the world of high purity alumina. Not something we know a lot about.
HPA. Not something you know a lot about, but what I'm loving about this new content thread is that I'm learning about a lot of companies that are outside my circle of competence.
Well, to put some context on just how interested we are as we speak to these smaller companies and their CEOs and their founders, Bryce and I just had a 20-minute conversation with Mike after we finished recording about staking mining claims and pegging a tenement. A whole new world.
Whole new world. Very interesting one, though.
Yeah. Anyway, if people want to pick up that conversation, hit us up on social media, because let's not talk about it here. Instead, let's introduce Impact Minerals. They're a mining explorer. Their main project at the moment, but one of just 11 projects, is a site 500 kilometres east of Perth in Western Australia, Lake Hope. And as we said, it's all about high purity alumina. We don't need to do much more description. Dr. Mike Jones can do that for us. But we should just remind everyone before we get into it, whilst we are licensed, we're not aware of your personal financial circumstances. Any content is for education and entertainment purposes only. Any advice is general. But most importantly, this Uncovered series is not a buy, hold or sell recommendation. We are doing these interviews and we're talking about these companies because we love learning about these companies and hearing their stories in their own words. But don't take it as a buy, hold or sell recommendation.
Absolutely. Well, let's get stuck in. Mike, welcome to Uncovered.
Yeah, thanks, guys, and it's great to be here.
So we'll start with a bit of an introduction into Impact Minerals. Can you help us understand the world of mining explorers, perhaps introduce us to them, and then the business of Impact Minerals?
Certainly. Look, I think all of your listeners and watchers will be aware that there's a big energy transition going on right now, that where the world is moving to electrification of its vehicles and its power supply globally. And it's probably not recognised as widely as it should be, but there's a significant amount of metal that is going to be required to help drive that energy transition. And so the world's mining business is really built currently to help fund and move towards shifting things away from oil, fossil fuels, and replacing that with electrification. And as I said, that's going to require a lot of metals. So the business is really separated into two groups. There are the miners, those that are already in production, and then companies like ourselves, Impact Minerals, who are explorers. So we're out there looking for the next generation of mines that are going to be required to provide all of this metal that's going to be needed. In particular, things like nickel, copper, and aluminium, which is our speciality. And those are two of the key ones, but there's also many others like cobalt and, of course, lithium. Lithium has been on everyone's lips this year, and there's been some great returns in the market from the lithium explorers and miners. So it's not an easy process trying to find a world-class deposit, and that's really what Impact was set up to do. We're looking for a giant, big world-class deposit. They're few and far between. It's not easy. And so it can take a long time, but there are great rewards there for shareholders as well as the general community should we find a major discovery. And as I mentioned, that's really what Impact is all about. So I hope that gives some background.
Yeah, it does. And there's a couple of projects that we really want to focus on today that you're working on at the moment. But I think before then, it would be great to understand a bit of Impact's history and what sort of brought you to this point. Impact has been listed since 2006. So give us a bit of the backstory. What's the company history in that time?
Most of my career has been in what we call project generation. So to simplify it, really drawing boxes on maps where we think there might be a deposit to be found. And I did that for a well-known mining company in Australia when I first started my career, Western Mining Corporation. That was eventually taken out by BHP. And I did the same thing as a consultant also for many years before deciding, well, maybe I should start doing this for myself rather than other people. And so That's why we listed Impact Minerals. But look, I've been around a long time, and there's a lot of one or two mine companies on the ASX, so small producers, and really the returns on those, they might be great in the early days, but really to try and build a long-lasting business, you need a world-class mine. Most major mining companies started with the discovery of one major mine, and as I mentioned previously, that's actually quite hard to do. So we set up Impact with the intention of only finding a world-class ore body, and as we mentioned, that can be difficult. So we've been at it for 16 years, which is quite a long time. But what I would say is that three of the recent major discoveries, which qualifies world-class in my opinion, and people can take a look at the history of these companies. So there's De Grey Mining with gold, there's Chalice Resources with their nickel palladium deposit, and then most recently, Azure with their lithium discovery. All got market caps north of $1 billion based on just the exploration results. And in each of those three cases, those companies had been going, 15 to 20 years in the case of Azure. So they come along few and far between, but they're by far the best return on your investment in the long term. So that was what Impact was all about. We've had a few small discoveries over the time, looking at exceptional, unusual things. So most discoveries are made on the edge. So if you have a normal distribution of mineral deposits, we're sort of always looking out through here, a few, 3 or 4 standard deviations from the mean, because we believe that's where the breakthroughs are made. And these new discoveries, like the Chalice discovery that I mentioned, was only found 70 kilometres outside of Perth in something that a lot of people had walked over and drove past, for many years. But it was left of field thinking, and that's where the big discoveries are made, and that's what we've tried to do over the years. And we just haven't quite got there, the little bit of luck that we need to make that major discovery. But we're hopefully changing that with our Lake Hope project.
Yeah, well, let's get to Lake Hope, because you mentioned the left of field thinking there, and I think when we were learning about Lake Hope before this interview, it really was some left of field thinking that led to this discovery. So tell us about Lake Hope, and let's start by introducing the left of field thinking that led to the discovery.
Yeah. Well, there were 2 pieces of left of field thinking. First, by the guy that discovered it, which I'll talk about in a second. But our left of field thinking was that we actually found this discovery on LinkedIn. So, so a geologist that I'd known from afar, Roland Gotthard, had been posting on LinkedIn that he had this unusual deposit out about 500 kilometres east of Perth. And basically he was cooking up high purity alumina in his kitchen, and was posting the results on LinkedIn. And it just looked unusual. And one of my geologists came to me one day and said, "Oh, Roland's drilling for aluminium in sand dunes." Now, as a geologist, that's a very unusual thing, and it sort of piqued my attention. So we sort of investigated further, and Roland sent me the information memorandum on the project. And basically, sort of, oh my God, there's a world-class ore body here, which is what Impact was set up to do. Let's get into it. So that was our left of field thinking, if you like. Roland's left of field thinking was this: is that the high purity alumina space, and obviously we'll talk a little bit more about that, the incumbents, the players that were trying to get going, were struggling with the processing of the particular minerals that they were trying to get high purity alumina out of. And Roland sort of thought to himself, well, what other minerals might aluminium or HPA occur in? Came up with a suite of minerals, designed a metallurgical process to extract the high purity alumina, got that to work, and then went out and found a deposit that actually had those minerals in it. So it was classic back to front thinking. So most people go out and explore, they find something, oh, how do we process this? And then they may or may not have difficulty with that. Whereas Roland was definitely back to front, left of field thinking. And that's really how we came across the project.
And so Lake Hope, just to be clear for those listening, Lake Hope is a large deposit of this high purity alumina.
It's the raw form of alumina. So alumina is aluminium oxide, has a formula Al2O3 for the chemists out there. And it's used in a variety of high-tech fields, which we'll talk about. And so there's a raw form of alumina in the top 2 metres of this lake at Lake Hope. There's approximately 900,000 tonnes of alumina in the top 2 metres of that lake. And the average production rate that we're aiming for is only 10,000 tonnes a year And so that gives you sort of nearly 90 years of, of supply if you want it. So it's a multi-decade mine, and that's the first tick in the box for any world-class deposit. It's got to be able to provide material for decades, not just 5 or 10 years. So that's a fantastic step right up front there.
Let's talk about high purity alumina, or HPA, because it's a critical battery metal. It's used in LEDs, batteries, as I said, in some semiconductors. But I don't reckon a lot of people will have heard of it, certainly not as well known as lithium or cobalt. We're looking at the price of HPA, 99.99% purity, gets you like 25,000 to 35,000 US dollars a ton. And then there's even more pure, 99.999% pure, which is even more expensive. So it's crazy just how pure some of these metals need to be when they're, being used in these nanotechnologies and stuff like that. But for people who have never heard of HPA before, tell us about it, and critically tell us how important it is for the energy transition that we're living through.
Yeah. There are two main uses for HPA, and the majority of it is 4N, or the 99.99. That's 4 nines, which we generally shorten to 4N. So 4N HPA is used two main fields. One is it's the separator between the anode and the cathode in lithium-ion batteries and other batteries. So if you recall, a few years ago, the Samsung phones were exploding in people's hands and pockets. And that's because the separator really wasn't doing their job properly, putting a poor quality HPA. And so obviously with the forecast increase in demand for lithium-ion batteries, in particular with the electric vehicles that are coming on over the next decade, that's one of the big growth markets for HPA. It is also used in other battery types, and some of those are competitors to the lithium batteries. And the battery technology space is evolving very dramatically, almost on a daily basis, and it's being led by China. They are a long way ahead in terms of battery technology compared to the rest of the world. And so it's a constant, source of is angst the right word, but research for us, to find out, what's going on in the battery space. So, but big use for HPA there. The second one is in LEDs, light emitting diodes, and there's probably three fields that you can look at for that. One is actually in light globes, and recently, most people might not be aware, but the USA has actually banned new incandescent light globes because they're not as energy efficient, and so LEDs are the only way to go in the US, and that'll probably come in other places as well. The second one is actually in micro LED screens. So we've heard like Apple are thinking of shifting all of their screens to micro LEDs, and Samsung and LG, etc. They all make their screens now out of with micro LEDs in them. All of those have HPA as a substrate on each of the LEDs. So the big forecast increase there. And the third one is actually in substrates for chips. So not as much volume in through there, but a significant growth market in there, and also sapphire glass. So all the screen covers sapphire glass, and people are they're made artificially out of HPA. So all in all, two big fields. That's what's driving the market. I will just make one comment about 5N and even 6N, that they are very profitable products if you can sell them, but there's no volume there. You can't build a major business around that. You have to build the business around the 4N and even 3N, so not quite as pure. That's where the volume is in the market. And if you're going to be a significant producer, that's the space you have to focus on. And then the 5N is really just the cream on the top. So all very well for some of our peers to come out and say, yeah, we've got 5N. Well, that's great if you can only sell, 2 tons of it a year. So you really need to be in the 10,000 ton a year of product in order to make a business out of it.
Mike, how does that compare to other deposits in Australia or globally?
So HPA is similar. It'd be what we call a bulk commodity. So we can include other things like kaolin, silica sands, but even lithium, and increasingly now rare earth elements. They've obviously been all the rage this year, those two groups. There is no shortage of any of those metals. And anyone who says any different, it really doesn't understand geology. They are very common metals around the world. And so when you enter the bulk commodity space, a number of things have got to be true. And as a young geologist, we were sort of encouraged not to get into some of the bulk commodities because it has to be the biggest, it's got to be the highest grade, or you've got to be first to market. And like Pilbara Minerals is a good example of that. Pilbara Minerals basically first to market in the lithium space, and they have been killing it, over the past few years. Or you're the lowest cost producer. And if one of those four, and preferably two or three of those, aren't true, you won't make it through the cycle. And now we're already seeing, the lithium market is now in a bit of surplus. The price has dropped off, and so some of these higher cost producers are already looking a bit dodgy. So the great attraction for Lake Hope is that we worked out very quickly is that it will be one of, if not the lowest cost producer globally of HPA, and we stand a chance of being a dominant player in the space. So that's a critical component of the work that we're doing right now.
It's fascinating. And we should be clear about where you are in that process. So Roland did his work, tested the initial samples. You guys partnered with Roland and acquired a controlling interest in the project. And now Impact is doing your own feasibility studies. Is that where the, I guess, project's life is? Or project's, yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. So Roland had done a huge amount of work on his own over a couple of years. As I said, basically cooking things up in his kitchen, and then he took it to one of the laboratories in Perth just to, prove from a bench scale test work that we could get through to 4N HPA, and he did that, and that's when we came across the project. So we're doing what's called a pre-feasibility study or preliminary feasibility study, which is really just to prove up the economics of the project to say plus or minus 10 to 15%. And that work is in progress, should be completed by the middle of next year. And a key component of that is actually replicating the Roland's process, or his company's called Player One, the Player One sulfate process, at the laboratory scale. We already know that it works, but what we're doing is optimizing it in the laboratory to work out what's the best temperature, the best pressure, the best reagents to use in order to optimize things to help design a plant to produce HPA en masse. So that's the key part of the feasibility study. We've basically completed a precursor to that called the scoping study, which is the same type of work but carried out to say plus or minus 30-35% accuracy. That study will be out within the next couple of weeks, and people will then be able to see the economics of the project. So the metallurgical test work is the key component of the work we're doing now, but in the background we're also doing geotechnical work to see how the lake will undergo mining, which should be very straightforward. It's only 2 meters deep. And also then going through the process required to lodge a mining lease application. We have our first meeting with the Department of Mines next week, and very shortly after that then we'll be in a position to lodge our mining lease application. We've got environmental baseline studies starting next week. So basically we're gearing up to push towards at least small scale production over the next 2 to 3 years, provided everything goes in order.
It's a long process. You got your scoping study, then your pre-feasibility study. I assume a feasibility study at some point after that. I was reading as we were preparing for this interview, you have plans to reach a 10-ton mini pilot plant next year, and then that will scale into a 1,000-ton pilot plant by 2026. It is a long process. I guess let's assume that things go really well, and everyone sees the opportunity at Lake Hope. As Impact is categorized as a mining explorer. I'm not sure if that's how you guys think about yourselves. What do you think about the long-term ambitions for this project? Is this something that you would want to prove that it's the top quality deposit and then sell to a major miner? Do you want to get into the mining game yourself? How do you and the executive team think about the long term here?
Look, I think with any discovery, and this is a significant discovery, you basically go along the route towards production until someone taps you on the shoulder. Our intention was always to build a company with $1 billion market cap, and we've seen, as I mentioned, De Grey, Chalice, and Azure, have all hit those targets. So there's a standout in this space. There's only one company that's currently very successful in the HPA space on the Australian market, and that's a company called Alpha HPA. A4N is their code. A bit like us, 5 years ago, they were a junior explorer. They came up with a new processing method. It actually works on a chemical feedstock, which we can talk about it if there's interest. But they, over the last 4 to 5 years, they are now into small scale production, and their market cap hit $1 billion, just recently. So definitely the scale is there. I suspect they will be taken out by a player at some point, but you just go along the route maximising value for shareholders until you either get into production and make a business, pay dividends, or somebody taps you on the shoulder and and takes you out.
So, Mike, we have only spoken about the one project, Lake Hope, but it's not the only one in your portfolio. You've got a number of other projects in development, and recently you were selected for BHP's Explore program. So can you tell us what that means and what it could mean for Impact Minerals?
Yes, as I mentioned, Impact has always been out there looking for the big find, and that requires big, bold ideas. And we've looked at various things over the years. We started off in Botswana, had some big ground in there for uranium. We were hit by Fukushima and a few other bits and pieces. So all of our projects have always had the potential, I believe, to be a world-class, to host a world-class discovery. And I think that was reflected, those ideas were reflected in the fact we were selected for the BHP Explore program. It was the first time it's been run. The second cohort is being interviewed as we speak. And so that started at the start of this year. The Explore program is basically a 6-month accelerator in which BHP will give you $500,000 to accelerate your exploration on the key project that you present to them. In our case, we were looking for copper in Broken Hill, and look, it was a fabulous experience. Obviously, the ideas that we came up with, were good enough to for BHP to put us in there. There were only 7 companies selected globally out of 250 applicants in the first ever cohort, and very proud to be one. And I thought that was sort of validation, if you like, of the work and effort we put in over the years. And so it was a thoroughly enjoyable experience. Applications are closed now. Look, it was one of the most rewarding things I've done in my career. It was just a very well thought out program, and I encourage anyone to get involved. So that philosophy flows through to all of our projects. And whilst we do have a number of projects, we are a project generator. The key one that we're focused on to add to the Lake Hope project is our Arkan Battery Metals project. It's here in Western Australia, one of the best places to work in the world. And it's only 150 kilometres outside Perth. And we've already generated some very interesting targets for nickel, for copper, for lithium, and for rare earths, the holy quadrant, as we like to call it. And so it's an early stage project, but we're starting to generate now, as we've moved into that area over the last couple of years, a very significant number of early stage geochemical anomalies at surface, all of which are going to be requiring drilling. And so we've got major drill programs planned for 2024 on that project. Putting out pre-feasibility test work results is not the sexiest thing in the marketplace, to say the least. And so we definitely need the exploration results to go through it. And just heading back to Lake Hope, because of the unique nature of the deposit, it's only 2 meters deep. The actual amount of cost in terms of doing the pre-feasibility is only in the say 2 million mark, and we'll probably get 43% of that back in terms of R&D. And so unlike if we'd have found a 10 million ounce gold deposit, which is what this is equivalent to, where it's tens of millions and 5 to 7 years to get it into production, it's a couple of $1 million and 2 to 3 years to get it into production. And that gives us the flexibility to still explore on our other projects. And who knows, we may yet come up with a world-class discovery on some of our own ground as well. So keep watching that project.
It is fascinating. Just this whole world, and I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes, the number of projects that you would have looked at over 16 years, and then you come across this project on LinkedIn. It's just funny how these things sort of just pop out of left field, and I'm sure you and the whole team must be pretty excited that what this could be.
One of my early mentors, a guy called Doug Haynes, and he's discovered probably 3 or 4 world-class ore bodies, including Olympic Dam. And he had some strange mannerisms about him. He used to say to me, he says, "Serendipity, Mike, serendipity. You just need a little bit of luck to go with all the other things that you do to deliver the big result." And I think our luck was, well, we're just curious people, and we were just curious about what Roland was doing on LinkedIn, and here we are now on the development route.
So I guess, we've really spoken about the upside and what this could be, but, you're still going through the process. So we should just be be clear that you still are going through the process and doing the feasibility studies and all of that. What are what are some of the big milestones that you'll be watching and that we as investors can be watching as you go through this process and you sort of build confidence that this is what you think it might be?
Yeah. To simplify the whole process, the key for us now is to produce the HPA from the unique process and the unique deposit in sufficient quantities that we can then get it in front of the customers in the battery market and the LED market. The thing about HPA, similar with coal and silica sands, various other bulk commodities, including iron ore, it's all about the quality of the product that you produce and how it performs in the end market. So in the case of iron ore, high quality iron ore, 65, 70%, gets the premium in the final, because the final steel is much better. It's the same with HPA. The cleanest HPA, gets the goods at the end. So it's all about getting that material into qualification, as we call it, and that can take 6 months to a couple of years to basically crack the client and provide the material that they want. So in the second quarter of next year, that's our big aim, is to start getting that in front of people. The other things in the background are obviously lodging of the mining lease, going through the environmental studies, etc., and the pre-feasibility work. And the pre-feasibility, just to remind everyone, it gives us an indication of how economic, or whether it is even economic, at a sort of a 10 to 15% margin, and we should have that completed by the middle of next year. And that's a big trigger point for obviously moving forward into building the pilot plant, the 10 tonne a year one, and then up to 1,000 tonnes per year. So those are the key milestones, and obviously drill results from the Arkham battery metal project again in the first and second quarter of next year. So it'll be an action-packed 2024.
Well, beyond Lake Hope, Mike, is there what's in the pipeline for new projects, and are there any parts of Australia or around the world that you're sitting there itching to get your hands on in terms of rights to explore?
I think if we came up with another project somewhere else in the world, people would accuse me of having project attention deficit disorder. We're always on the lookout for great projects, and whilst we do have a lot of land, we've got a potential spin out happening of some copper gold ground that we have in New South Wales. The seed capital has been raised for that, and that's they're looking to list that. The group that's buying 75% of that project, looking to list in March of next year. Broken Hill, obviously part of the Explore program. We've got other parties now interested in that. So we're trying to, in the project generator model like we have, trying to monetize the things that we're not interested in, or getting joint venture partners, is a key part of the process, but always retaining some equity or, royalty on the projects. Look, the real focus is Lake Hope and Arkham. Trying to find a world-class ore body. It's great to have majors involved, but we really came to do it ourselves. So if we have over the years, had the opportunity, some great targets. Well, should we get a joint venture partner in? No, we came to do this ourselves and give our shareholders the maximum reward. I mean, that's what the exploration game is all about. That's what we're in it for. That's what we're passionate about. Is trying to find a world-class ore body, and so toss up. Do we drill this hole ourselves or get a partner in? I'd always drill that hole. I don't care, because it's like, hey, now that's actually failed every time we've tried it so far in terms of a major deposit. But look, as I say, it took the other players, Chalice de Grey, etc., 20 years, 17, 18, 20 years to get there, but it eventually paid off. So
it only needs to work once.
It only needs to work once. So yeah. So look, to cut a long story short, we are looking to rationalise the portfolio. That does allow us to perhaps bring in, something else. But as I say, it's all about focus, and the focus right now is Lake Hope. We need to drive that forward. It's a world-class deposit. It's got world-class economics, as we'll show in the scoping study shortly. And we really need to get that into production as fast as we can.
Well, Mike, we want to say a massive thanks for joining us today. We've touched on this a little bit throughout the interview, but we always do like to finish with this question. If you think about Impact Minerals in the long term, 10, maybe 20 years from now, what does success look like for you?
I think 20 years from now, I'm going to be 80. I'm hopefully going to be finally on my yacht somewhere in the Mediterranean, which was part of the plan of starting Impact in the first place. Look, I think certainly over the next 10 years, we stand an excellent chance of being the dominant player in the HPA space. And when you're in a small market, in any commodity, any business that you want to be in, you're better off being a big player in a small market than a small player in a big market. You've got pricing power, you've got all sorts of strengths, and you make it through the cycle. So that's I think that's a fantastic aim for us, and we're looking forward to getting on the journey, as we say. And despite all the ups and downs, you've always got to remember this under here. Look, keep calm as we're going through the process.
Nice, Mike. Well, that does bring us to the end today. There's no doubt about your passion for finding good quality sites, and good luck with it. And it's an exciting time for Impact Minerals, and I hope that the Equity Mates community listening got value out of this conversation, because we certainly did. So thank you very much.
You have been listening to an Equity Mates Media production. In the spirit of reconciliation, Equity Mates Media acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. This podcast is intended for education and entertainment purposes. Any advice is general advice only and has not taken into account your personal financial circumstances, needs or objectives. Before acting on general advice, you should consider if it is relevant to your needs and read the relevant product disclosure statement. And if you're unsure, please speak to a financial professional. The hosts of this podcast and their guests may have positions in the companies mentioned. Equity Mates Media operates under an Australian Financial Services Licence 540697.